Yeah, are we live?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Badri. Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to one and all our viewers on YouTube. Welcome to what will be the last monthly heritage talk of the year for 2023, the December 2023 monthly talk. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us again on this evening. Before we start with the evening's session, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to give you all a very quick introduction on Tamil Heritage Trust. THT, or Tamil Heritage Trust, was established as a not-for-profit organization in 2010 in Chennai and has been run by a dedicated group of volunteers ever since. It has made its mission to create a certain understanding, appreciation, celebration, which finally leads to a dissemination of information, valuable information on India's heritage. And that's been its objective right from its very first year of conception. And to do this, it has come up with a variety of programs, events, sessions, and workshops. The first of which is this very forum which all of you are attending today, the monthly heritage talk. This has been the earliest event of Tamil Heritage Trust, something which started right back in 2010. Every first Saturday of the month, we have one online talk in English by a speaker of repute from across the country on a matter related to heritage. And this has resulted in an online collection of 100+ videos, which we have available for everyone for free on Tamil Heritage Trust's YouTube channel. On the third Saturday of every month, we have an equivalent heritage talk, but this time it happens both in person in Chennai at the RK Center, as well as being streamed online on our YouTube channel. And this talk is in Tamil. So this is something which we've started relatively recently, but we've seen a lot of appreciation and reception of. Apart from these monthly talks, the monthly talk in English and the monthly talk in Tamil, once a year, we also have something which we call Pecha Kacheri, and quite appropriately held in the month of December. And this is a twin event of the song and dance, which is celebrated in the city of Chennai every year. This is something which we started in 2011 and have explored one topic with a great deal of depth and breadth by inviting experts and subject matter experts to come speak about a certain thematic kind of topic. In fact, this year's Pecha Kacheri will be held on December 16th and 17th. And the topic we'll be exploring this year is the Hoysalas. In the past years, we've looked at Vijayanagara, we've looked at the Cholas, the Pandyas, the Pallavas, and we've also celebrated noteworthy experts and doyens of the field of art and architecture, like Dr. Nagaswamy. This was last year's Pecha Kacheri on Vijayanagara. Like I said, this year's event will be on December 16th and 17th. In Chennai on the Hoysalas. So if you're in town, please do join us in person. Otherwise, you can log on to our YouTube channel and catch the speakers. What we started a couple of years back is also the Indology Festival, which has a far more expansive and ambitious kind of remit, which is to not just restrict ourselves to either the state or the country, but to try and bring in speakers of international repute. So the inaugural Indology Festival, which was held in 2020, fully online, we had speakers from across the globe join us and talk about Indology, its study and its practice. Subsequently, we've had two more editions of the Indology Festival. So there was one in 2021, which spoke of the temple builders of medieval India, and the one which happened earlier this year, Sagara Sangama, which stitched together a set of talks by speakers on India and the sea. So this, of course, is our YouTube channel, which I was speaking of. We have close to 8,000 subscribers and an extremely valuable collection of 200+ videos of all the scholars, academics, and experts who've spoken at the various fora which I just explained. So please do visit us if you're visiting us for the first time. Please do also subscribe and follow all the activity on this channel. Given that we are based in Chennai, largely for Chennai audiences, but we've also had people traveling in from Bangalore and Hyderabad joining us for these in-city physical workshops. And we run a few of them, a house at, or how to see a temple, and house Sam, or how to see a museum are the two most regular workshops which we run. So these are typically held over the weekend in a full day format, where we meet in the morning at a physical venue. We have a set of sessions, after which we actually take the workshop on site, either to a temple or to the museum itself. We do have these workshops almost every other month, and we send out these notifications to all our subscribers and people who have subscribed to our WhatsApp group. So if you haven't attended these workshops and would be interested, please do so. We also have something which we call a site seminar, which is another annual event, where a small group of 40 to 50 interested heritage enthusiasts pick a location or a destination, heritage destination for that year, thoroughly research it, and exchange information on their research and findings prior to the actual travel through presentations, after which the actual site visit itself happens. And this has been something which has again been going on for several years now. Alamar Away, or Teachers for Heritage, is THT's endeavor to build a capacity building program for school teachers and sensitize them to India's heritage and how it can offer itself to educational explorations within the classroom. So we've run 2 batches of this. The second batch has just concluded, and we've had quite a resounding kind of reception for this effort, and we hope to run future batches of Alamar Away as well. Coming now to the award section of the various things which Tamil Heritage Trust does. There are 2 key award events which have been conceptualized and conducted by Tamil Heritage Trust. The first of which is the absolutely unique V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award, named for the first epigraphist of Indian origin, V. Venkaya. We have had 2 editions of this award so far, and very happy to note that exceptional scholars, researchers, and academics, Dr. Y. Subrailu won this award in the first year, and Dr. P.V. Krishnamurthy won this award in the second year. The other homegrown award of THT Tamil Heritage Trust is the THT Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award, which is again an annual award given every year, but this time to a young contributor who has shown tremendous potential and promise for furthering the cause of Indian heritage. Named for one of the co-founders of Tamil Heritage Trust, Professor S. Swaminathan. We've had 4 awardees so far, and you can see pictures of the winners of the award in this slide. So that's a quick roundup of the things which we do at Tamil Heritage Trust. If you have any questions or any suggestions for us, please do write in, and we're happy to stay in touch with you. Coming now to the reason we've all assembled together today, and this is to listen to a talk by Dr. Srikumar Menon from NIAS, National Institute of Advanced Study, Bangalore. The talk itself is titled Monuments of Memory, from Megaliths to Temples in the Malaprabha Valley. It is my pleasure to introduce to you all Dr. Srikumar Menon. Dr. Srikumar Menon is an architect with a keen interest in the history and archaeology of the Indian subcontinent. Before his illustrious innings as an academic, first in Manipal Institute of Technology and now at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore, Dr. Srikumar Menon was also a practicing architect. In fact, his initial stint was in private architectural practice at Bangalore, as well as research at the IUCA, the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, Pune, on the design of astronomical observatories. Like I mentioned, Professor Srikumar Menon taught for 15 years as a member of the Faculty of Architecture at Manipal Institute of Technology before joining the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore now. His primary interests focus on ancient architecture, which also happens to be part of the topic which he will cover today, prehistoric monuments, as well as later monuments such as stupas and temples. Professor Menon has been awarded the Professor D.S. Achyutarao Memorial History Research Fellowship for his PhD, and he's also been awarded the Homi Bhabha Fellowship for studying the ancient landscapes of South India. Professor Menon's continued interest remains in the sites of the Malaprabha Valley, which is what he will speak of today. And his nearly lifelong engagement with the subject has led to deep insights about the continuity of commemorative traditions from prehistoric to later times and the influence of prehistoric architecture on later monuments. As you can see, Dr. Menon is a man of many interests, and apart from what you see on the slide, he also has an interest in cricket, writing, as well as nature and photography as well. So it is our absolute pleasure to have Dr. Srikumar Menon join us today at Tamil Heritage Trust for the monthly talk. Thank you very much, Dr. Menon, for accepting our invitation, and I invite you now to take over and present.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. At the outset, I'm very happy to be here to talk to on this program by the Tamil Heritage Trust, and my thanks are due to Ashwin, Badri, Shyam, and everybody else who is involved with this thing. And that presentation by Ashwin was very eye-opening for me. The sheer breadth and the enthusiasm shown by members of the Tamil Heritage Trust is very laudable, I think. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm privileged to be a small part of it right now. So I'll just share my screen, and then we can move on with the talk. My full screen has come on, I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so like Ashwin told you, today I'll be talking to you about the place which has got a very special spot in my heart. It's called the Valley of the River Malaprabha, and it's in northern Karnataka. So the title of the talk is Monuments of Memory. So I'll be talking to you about how the prehistoric commemorative traditions seem to have continued in the form of temples in the Malaprabha Valley. So the picture that you're seeing here on the top is the site of Aihole, where you can see megaliths in the foreground and the Jain temple, the Meguti Jain temple in the background, the 7th century temple. And below what you're seeing is right in Badami, there is this rock which we'll be talking about in great detail at some part of the talk, and this little temple which holds some clues to proving this hypothesis that I've been talking about for some time now. So let's start our journey from this with this wonderful quote, which I keep. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's by Colin Renfrew, the prehistorian. He says that the landscape in which we live is a constructed environment, rich with the memories of earlier people and events. Now, this might seem very obvious, but when you look at especially sites like Badami, Aihole, and Pattadakkal in the Malaprabha Valley, and you see how much of the early prehistory you can see in the place where people are currently living, and you can see the layers of history as you traverse the landscape, and that's something which has been very, very fascinating for me during my study in this area. So we'll start again our journey in a different place. This is a place called Hirebenakal. It's north of Hampi. And you can see that what you're seeing are some of the most spectacular dolmens. They are megalithic monuments. Dolmens are box-like structures. I'll come into it more detail in a little bit. So these are the more impressive. There is a huge number of dolmens situated on a remote hilltop where nobody visits usually. And like I told you, it's north of the World Heritage Site of Hampi. It's a very spectacular place, and you can see that all the megaliths there are not very spectacular like the ones you saw in the previous slide. Some of them, what Professor Sundara has termed as irregular polygonal chambers, they are basically just slabs of rock which have been pried loose from the bedrock and raised on and propped up on smaller boulders, like you can see here. And they are also megaliths. And though they look very insignificant, when a large number of them come about in the landscape, like you can see here, it alters the landscape substantially. It looks like a very, very different place from what it was when before these people intervened on the scene. And now we come to another site in Tamil Nadu, which is this place called Mallasandram, which is near Krishnagiri, near the place called Veerpalam. And there you have what do you call? You have very spectacular the structure and the nucleus of of these formations is a dolmen similar to the Hierbential type. In fact, the similarity with Hierbential is uncanny. But then you have these huge stone slabs arranged in circles around them that makes it more spectacular than Hierbential. But once again, all the monuments in the nearby hills are not so spectacular, though we have the Mallasandra monuments, which are all absolutely large, like this 2 meters tall from base to capstone. But you have also smaller ones. This is a nearby hilltop called Etrapalli. And Etrapalli has this smaller thing, like I showed you in Hierbential, they have these monuments called the irregular polygonal chambers. And the entire hillside is dotted with that. And in fact, some of the monuments are so unspectacular that they're just a slab of stone propped up on tiny pieces of tiny pebble-like things. And just to show you that it's not something which somebody put up yesterday or day before, you find similar things both in Aihole in Karnataka as well as in Krishnagiri. So it is something. So which brings us to the question, what exactly is a megalith? So if you look at the meaning of the word, megalith, mega and lith, it refers to the scale, which is large, and the material, which is stone. So basically, it means built of large stones. Though we now extend it to some monuments which do not conform to this definition also. That I will not go into that in detail right now. But the more prominent ones, the ones built of large stones, were the ones which are noticed first, which is why the name came about. And now we stick to it for historical reasons. Now megaliths what are they? They are funerary, which means that they hold the remains of dead human beings, and other monument. Other means that there are certain megaliths which we do not understand their purpose of prehistoric cultures. Now the key thing here is that megalithic is not a period. It's a cultural practice of erecting these monuments, and it happens at different stages of human development in different places in the world. Like if you look at Europe, some of the monuments are shown here. It happened in the late Neolithic, and in India, it happened largely during the Iron Age, and even persists into the early historic period. So, megalithism is a worldwide phenomenon. You find them all over the place, like these examples from Russia, Ireland, France, and Scotland that I've been showing here. And in India, the first megalith was reported from Kerala in 1823 by somebody called Babington. And in these decades that have intervened, so we know close to 3,000 megalithic sites, mostly confined to southern India, but also in pockets in northern India, like Vidarbha and the northeast, of course. So if you open up some of these megaliths in South Indian megaliths, you find defleshed or rather secondary burials of multiple people inside that. Basically, they must have buried them initially somewhere. When the flesh has gone off, they excarnate, and then they take the skull and the long bones and then they bury them. Or sometimes there are cremated remains of multiple people inside a single megalith. And there is a typical pottery which is known as black and red ware, which has been associated with these. And a large number of them contain iron objects, which is led to the understanding that they are mostly Iron Age monuments. Though I must say that I believe that they probably originated in the preceding Neolithic, and they became more popular and widespread throughout South India in the Iron Age. And in certain places, they persisted even into the age of temple building, as we shall see. To give you a rough dateline for this, I take this paper from Bauer and Johansson. And the South Indian Neolithic, roughly from 3000 to 1200 BC. These are not absolute dates. These are, they're not watertight. You can go here and there. You have the Iron Age, a subsequent period from 1200 to 500 BC. And the early historic, we can take the 1000 years from 500 BC to 500 AD. Okay, and where are the megaliths concentrated? If you look at it, South India is completely a megalithic country. You can see that it's totally, this is taken from Brubaker's paper where he puts megaliths in their locations in the Indian subcontinent. You can see that there are considerable pockets in Vidarbha, in Uttar Pradesh. You can see even megaliths in the Kashmir Valley here. And of course, we have not shown it here in this thing, but Northeast also has a lot of living megalithism, as you can call it, which I won't be going into. So let us go into, okay, I'll just skip these two slides in the interest of time. And so megaliths are very varied in form. So if you look at it, there are certain forms which are very endemic to certain regions, like central and northern Kerala, you find the Kodakkal or the umbrella stone. This is shown from Thrissur in Kerala. It's a very, because in South India you have laterite stones which cannot be trimmed into this thin slabs that you see in Hiravankel, etc. So the megalith builders have kind of made a new form which looks like a mushroom, and you don't find it elsewhere. And again, in mostly in Kerala and also in South Kannada district of Karnataka, you find rock cut tombs. Again, you see the rock there is laterite, so it's a very soft stone. So sometimes you just cut chambers into the stone, which again, as it is, all megaliths generally have a chamber in which you keep the funereal remains. Sometimes you mark the place with a menhir, as you can see the slab menhir, which is part of a larger alignment in a place called Nilaskal in southern Karnataka. All the dolmens on Meguti Hill, which dolmens are box-like structures, which might have contained remains of dead people. This is on Meguti Hill, we'll encounter it again. And some of them are very inexplicable, like this alignment called Hanam Sagar. It doesn't seem to be sepulchral, doesn't seem to be commemorative, but there is upwards of 2,500 stones which are arranged in a grid, a staggered grid in the landscape in a place called Hanam Sagar in Karnataka. Unfortunately, this has been destroyed recently. So now let us move to the Malaprabha Valley as such. The Malaprabha is a river. It's a tributary of the river Krishna. If you can see, this is this little faint blue line which is snaking across the picture from the lower left to the upper right. So it mainly passes through the river Malaprabha originates at a place called Kanakumbi, on the eastern flanks of Western Ghats, and then it flows along this coast till it meets the Krishna at Kudali. And so just before it enters the so-called Malaprabha Valley, it's basically bounded on the north and south by the sandstone cliffs that you can see here. So the valley is not more than 8 to 10 kilometers at its widest. So just before it enters the valley, to the north, you have the site of Badami. And when it somewhere midway through through the Malaprabha Valley, it takes a conspicuous turn toward the north, where it is seen as Uttaravahini and auspicious place to set up temples. That's where you have the famous Pattadakal group of temples. And where it exits the valley, you have the town of Ayhole. And this was the seat of the early Chalukyan Empire for about middle of 6th century to the middle of the 8th century, and where they had their hostilities with the Pallavas of Kanchi and all that. I'm sure you know about all that. So, but much before the Chalukyans, set up their empire in Badami, the capital in Badami, this place had a lot of history of monument building, which are basically megalithic monuments, which I will show you in a while. So if you come to Badami, so Badami is basically this, the sandstone cliffs there make kind of a C-shaped or a U-shaped value, depending on how you want to look at it. And Pulakeshi the first, he created a bund on the western side of this C-shaped valley, which can all the runoff, the stormwater runoff collected there and formed the artificial tank called the Agastya Tirtha. And the historic settlement of Badami is also below the modern settlement of Badami, so it's not excavated. And the monuments that Badami is so famous for, the cave temples, for example, are on the southern face of the cliffs, and all the structural temples are mostly in the north fort, and some of them are on the eastern side, which we will see in a little bit. So this is how, if you climb on the cliffs in the east and look towards the west, this is what you see. What you see in the foreground is a Bhutanatha group of temples projecting very scenically into the Agastya Tirtha. This is the bund that Pulakeshi created. And this rock called Panchalinganafadi, that's also something that we will look at in detail in the later part of our talk. So this the famous cave temples or the rock cut temples of Badami are in these cliffs that you see here. And the structural temple you can see here, the lower Shivalaya, the upper Shivalaya, and all that. It's a very scenic place. And this is from the south, when you're looking towards the north, you can see the structural temples here, the upper Shivalaya, the lower Shivalaya, and the, the other, there's some open mantapas here. It's a little dark because it was overcast here. I don't know whether you can see it. Anyway, this is, I was telling you that even much before the Chalukyas came on the scene, we had human habitation in this region. So if you, from Badami, there's a short trek of about 3 hours into a place called Sidilafadi. Sidilafadi in Kannada means that the cave created out of the rock cut out by the lightning. So this is a prehistoric cave rock shelter here. And you have a lot of, this is a rock shelter, you can, the natural sandstone arch you can see here. On the walls of it, you have rock art from the Paleolithic, rock art experts opine, and also to later period, like you can see here, and also some Shankalipi kind of inscriptions which have not been deciphered. And you also have early historic paintings and inscriptions there. Then near Badam, near the town itself, there is this Mesolithic rock art, which may be anything up to 25,000 years old, which shows a couple, a man and a woman dancing, and a herd of wild boar at their feet. So we really wouldn't be able to understand what this meant to the creators, but people have given the opinion probably this is a place where the Mesolithic people prayed to their gods before or invoke some magic before going on their hunt, and these are the prey animals that you see here. This will forever remain conjecture. But the way these figures have been drawn, if you look at them, they're very modern in their conception. And this particular style of rock art with the very prominent thighs and all that's shown here is very peculiar to the Malaprabha Valley. In several sites, you find them here. So this is the man and this is a woman, and these are the these are the wild boar that you can see here in this thing. And yeah, so you see rock art at several places in the valley. So this is a place called Hire Mahakuta. This temple that you see here is a place called Hire Mahakuta. And there you see the temple here, and behind the temple there is this scarp of rock where you have I wouldn't call this prehistoric because a lot of people have thought, I'm not an expert in epigraphy, but they say that these are Shankalipi characters and they're not really rock. To me, it looks like 3 human beings, but people have said that they are Shankalipi characters. This temple is also very interesting because it's called Hire Makuteshwara, the old Makuteshwara. So this is a flat roof temple, but they've very cleverly placed it under a Makuteshwara. So the Shikhara is actually a actual mountain which forms the Shikhara of the temple. If you're looking at the which is near a Tirtha. Now I'm just giving you a basic introduction to the place. You will understand the importance of this to the thesis I'm making a little later. So this 2 flat roof temples that you see here, to the left shelter, which is a very interesting place, you have a lot of Hindu divinities which have been carved here. Narasimha. There's been the many other, even Kolhapur Mahashmi here. It's a very late period sculpture. It's been carved around what is a natural pool, a natural rock pool, and very close to this there is another rock cut structure which has a inscription here. So we know that it commemorates a Jain ascetic called Vardhamana Deva. Now this is not from the Chalukyan period; it's much later. It's probably 16th century. And this person who lived and died in this rock shelter, you can see the rock shelter here. These are the feet that have been carved here. And you can see it is very far removed from the North Fort, which you can see in the distance here. So this is where Vardhamana Deva lived and probably died. And he is commemorated in the rock shelter where he lived his very ascetic, austere life throughout here. So what I'm trying to point out is that tendency of commemoration, starting with Vardhamana Deva's memorial here. You also, so this is the Google Earth image. This polygon that you see here is Vardhamana Deva, and it's quite close to out there, which is not a commemorative thing, but it's in the same. If you want on the left, you see a feet that you can see here. It's very close to a rock cut water body on the North Fort, and nearby. So there are indications that wooden poles must have been set up. Sort of a pandal must have been created there, and this water must have been used for Shraddha. And then you have on the shores of this, the rocky shores of the water body, you again have feet cut into the padukas which have been put in here. There are also mobile ones, the stones which you see here, which again has a little depression for lighting a lamp and all that. And this, which is right now been inserted into a wall leading to the some part of the South Fort, is a votive which relatives of this person have offered to some temple, and he's shown in a mode where he's having an offering, and this must have been placed in the temple and must have been come out at some other point. This is the opinion of Professor A. Sundara. Description to a person called Kappe Arabata. Kappe Arabatana Shasana, it's called. Earliest example of Tripadi poetry in Kannada, and it talks about a person called Kappe Arabata, who is called the Kaliyuga Viparitan, and who preferred death to humiliation. So the way it is worded, it looks like it is a memorial. It's commemorative there. And by the side of it, you have another structure here, which is, it shows a temple with a linga inside it and Nandi. I'll show you a closer view about it later. This kind of structures abound on the landscape. So here, very close to the Bhutnath temple was that boulder I showed you in the first picture. And you have something like, there's this temple structures carved on the rock. And in these temples, there are lingas and there are Nandis facing it, like Nandi Mandapa. So a lot of scholars have given the opinion that these are the temple elevations created by architects to advertise, where somebody else said that these are commemorative structures. You have temples which are commemorative structures to commemorate people of probably greater prestige or greater religious importance, and to lesser people of lesser the lesser elite, I would call them. You have these commemorative things here. Like you can see here, this particular thing was near Kapayarpatna Shasana here. You also have Vishnu images, which you can see here and which you can see here. And there are some reason I've done some work which has sort of clinch the issue that these are commemorative things. One example I would like to show you is this temple here. If you enter the temple, it's a very small temple. On the when you enter on the left, on the wall, there is a person who is sitting there with some offering in his hands, and his sacred thread is worn the other way, apasavya as we call it, which is normally done when you do death rituals or whatever. And if you talk to the people nearby, till ASI took over the site and banned it, there were Shraddha ceremonies happening in the Bhutnath shrine, near the Bhutnath shrine in the Agastya Tirtha, till quite recently, maybe 60 years ago. And now the name Bhutnath itself, in the inscription, it is referred to as Bhuteshwara. So that is also quite suggestive that there's a temple to Shiva there, and also there are some Vishnu shrines also nearby. And then there are these lot of commemorative structures nearby. Initially, when I proposed this, there was a lot of opposition. But recently, a lot of papers have come where they seem to say that this offers a better, better way out for this. The reason why these structures are there on the rock. Now, commemorative structures on rock is not unknown at all in other places. So the lower two things show you examples from Shravanabelagola, which is a Jain center there. So you have, these are all commemorative. So it shows the Tirthankara involved, the teacher of the person and the person who is being commemorated. The standard way of showing a memorial here, and the sun and the moon to show that the memory will persist as long as these heavenly bodies exist. There's also this large rock called Siddharagundu, where again it is commemorative. So this is established that Professor Shetter's work, Professor S. Shetter, his work on Shravanabelagola has proven that these are all commemorative. In fact, the inscriptions prove it themselves. And then I want to tell two other examples which are not proven, but I feel that they are also commemorative. So you have Pechipallam on Samanar Malai in Madurai, the Jain carvings there. At least one of the inscriptions talks about of a monk who died due to snake bite. So I think that these carvings are also commemorative. And at Sringeri, by the side of the Tunga River, you have this again a linga, a Nandi, and two people, a man and a woman shown here. And you can see feet out here, the padukas on the other side. And this comes very close to a water body. So I think that this must have been a place again where Shraddha was offered to dead people. And Sringeri also has other commemorative temples. I'll come to it in a bit. So now let us travel further down the Malaprabha and reach Pattadakal. Like I told you, the river takes a conspicuous turn towards the north. And on the left bank of the river, you have the famous temple, the World Heritage Site of Pattadakal. And near Pattadakal, there is a place called Bachanagudda. So Bachanagudda has two surviving dolmens. So Sundara feels that these are two surviving dolmens of much more which existed earlier. And this is the sandstone dolmen that you see here. It's out of very thick stones of slabs of sandstone that you see here. And there's also a granite dolmen, which if you go inside the dolmen and look out, there's a temple that you see from the Rashtrakuta period on the shoulder of the hill. Now, this temple is not located at the summit. It's on the axis of where this megalith is pointing to. And if you climb the hill, this is called Bachilingeshwara temple. It's got Brahma, Narasimha, and probably a missing sculpture which must have been Shiva. And inside is a large Shivalinga. And again, I propose that this is a commemorative temple. And from the top of Bachanagudda, if you look down, this is where you see the granite dolmen there. The dolmen is quite large. It has got, cupules which have been specked all along its periphery of its capstone, like it's decorative. You can see it clearer when the light is right in this image. And just to show you that this region has a history of commemorative temples, if you go to a place called Huligamanakolla, which is again near Pattadakal, it's a very spectacular site. In the rainy season, there's a large waterfall which comes down this cliff here. And in the shelter behind the cliff, you have a Chalukyan site, which you have the images of the Saptamatrikas. The Chalukyas are supposed to be children of Saptamatrikas, and Ganesha here, and the Trimurtis here, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. And this entire site is, the site is entirely Chalukyan rather. So you have temples. There are about 10 temples in front of it, which some of them are Pansana and some of them are flat roof. And these seem to be sepulchral temples, not even just commemorative, actually sepulchral, because there is this particular temple, which looks unfinished, very crude, with this unfinished Dwarapalas here. But there is an inscription on this side, which you can see a close-up here in 8th century Kannada inscriptions, which suggests that this is a sepulchral temple of this Vikramaditya, the Chalukyan king called Vikramaditya II. So there is some controversy whether this belongs to Vikramaditya II or somebody else, but nobody doubts that it is commemorative, because this inscription says that it contains the heavenward casket. Karandada is the word that they use, of Vikramaditya II. And this place has other association with death, because nearby to this temple, there is a natural boulder, sandstone boulder, into which is carved a typical hero stone. Now, this you can see the 3 panels that are typical of this hero stone of the Chalukyan period. You can see the person who is being commemorated here, and that he died protecting cattle, that you can see here at the bottom. So he's the guy who perished in a cattle raid. Either most probably he was a protector of cattle, or he was one of the raiders. We don't know. So this is definitely a monument which is associated with death. And these temples here also seem to be commemorative, like this, what do you call this, inscription is suggesting. And so this is the temple that you see here. And this thing that you see here is a hero stone. It's very close by. And so now, I was now looking at the main World Heritage site of the temples of Pattadakal. You have the Virupaksha temple, the Mallikarjuna, the Kashi Vishwanatha, and many other, the Sangameshwara here. So there you have temples in the Nagara as well as the Dravida style of building. Then I found this old paper in 1971 by M.S. Mate and Shobhana Gokhale, which says Aihole and interpretation. And they have claimed that all these structures are commemorative. Now they have arrived at it from other angles, comparing with some commemorative sites in Orcha, the famous Chhatris of Orcha and all that. And they say that all these temples are commemorative. Now, most people who study Pattadakal, most visitors to Pattadakal are taken in by the large, spectacular temple which exists there, as it should be, very rightly should be. But there are scores of smaller temples here, which nobody pays attention to. Okay, and if you look at some of them, they look like, most of them are just a small chamber with a linga in it and a mandapa with a nandi in it, just like you saw on the rocks, the carvings of the rocks in Badami. You have it there, and some of them look very much like dolmens. You have this stone which is scooped out of a single stone, actually, with a portal. You cannot enter. It's a very small thing with a linga inside it, and this is very much like a capstone. Okay, and if you look at this kind of a thing, the way the stones are arranged also is very reminiscent of the way that the slabs are arranged in a dolmen. And you can see it. This is the other structure that I was telling you, that you have a Nandi Mandapa and a small shrine with a linga inside. In fact, if you talk, I was talking to some of the what do you call, the masons who work on the renovation of it. So they call dolmens the Dabkal Gudi. So Dabkal means capstone. So they call it a capstone shrine, in fact. So it looks to me that these are very it's a shrine equivalent of a dolmen. And now we move on to Aihole. It's a very rushed journey, but I have a lot to show you here. So you come to the fortified town of Aihole, which is also the scene of a very large, the site of a very large merchant guild called Aihole Ainuravaru. So here you have this Meguti. So if you look here in the previous map, this is the settlement of Aihole, and in the south you have this hill called Meguti Hill. And in the Meguti Hill, there is this temple, Meguti Temple, Jain temple that you see here. This is the Meguti Jain temple. It's an unfinished temple. But interesting thing here is that you have an inscription by this poet called Ravikirti, which is shown in the insert here. which gives us an exact date for the temple, which is 634 AD or Common Era. The interesting thing is that this temple is inside a walled compound, but south of this temple, there are plenty of megaliths. This is a dolmen I showed on the opening slides. So you can see the Meguti Jain temple here in the north. It's a north-facing temple also. And you have the fortified compound around it. But behind it, this place is full of megaliths. Some of them are large ones like this, what you see here. Some of them are very crude, like I showed you in Etrapalli and Hirabanikal and all that. You can see here the Jain temple in the north and this entire place. So suppose the megaliths had been disjointed from the culture which built the temples, then obviously there was such a source of cut stone, especially when you're building fort walls and all that. They respected the megaliths and left them alone when they were building the temple. So it shows that they had some cultural significance for the people who built the temples also. And there's other views of it you can see here. This is a couple of the large megaliths that you can see here. There's an inscription on Sri Satyashraya on this, which I think is from a later period, inscribed onto the existing megalith. Though we see megaliths here as box-like structure with a capstone, in fact, when they were in some parts of the site, they are more intact. So basically, they were cobbles are packed around the outer walls of the megaliths, and other slabs are placed around it. You can see that one of them has fallen out here. So this is more or less what it would have looked like when they were complete. You wouldn't see it as a box-like thing. You would see it as a
Srikumar,
probably.
We are.
Did somebody say anything?
Yeah, your audio, I think your internet connection is a little choppy. We keep losing you a little bit here and there, your audio. Hello.
Am I back on?
Yeah, you are back on. You can maybe.
Hello, am I back?
Yeah, you are back.
On?
Still, it is not as stable as it should be.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Slide or should I share again?
Sorry?
Let me just. Okay. I'll just share this again. I think it's gone to. I'll have to find the live slide again. So, am I full screen is back again?
Not yet. Not full screen.
Yeah.
So
now I guess it. Is it okay now? Mine shows full screen.
Yeah. Now you are on. Yeah.
Okay. So I was telling you about these two dolmens, which are, because like I've been showing you dolmens, which are basically either box-like structures with a capstone on it, or smaller stone with a capstone on it. But these two megaliths, one that you see here behind the temple and the one that you see here, are capstones which are placed on pillars or legs, structures like that. So I have not been able to visit the Montebello dolmen, but I have visited the Galaganatha dolmen. So the Galaganatha temple, if this is Aihole and this was your Meguti hill, so this is to the southwest. Okay, so you have two groups of temples here, the Ramalingeshwara as well as the Galaganatha here. So this is the Ramalingeshwara temple that you can see here. This structure is a modern structure which holds the temple chariot. And this is the Galaganatha group, which is a Chalukyan group. There have been later contributions also to it. So this is a Galaganatha dolmen. Like I was telling you, you have this capstone which is raised on 6 legs, and it is right behind the temple of the Galaganatha group. And this is a historical picture of it, and this is the Montebello dolmen. And now if you go to the south of these structures, you again have structures which are associated with death. Like for example, there's a megalithic cairn here, and in that there are 3 hero stones, 2 of which you can see here. So the hero stones show that it was a place where death was commemorated. And then if you go further to the exploring further to the south of it, this one is a passage grave which is embedded in a cairn that you can see here. Far away in the distance, you can see the Meguti temple. And this is yet another dolmen, which is a crude dolmen, I would say, the IPC or the irregular polygonal chamber, which is basically just the the bedrock slab has been pried loose from it and raised on top of some smaller stone pieces, which you can see here. There are temples scattered among them also. This is a west-facing temple, and if you notice, this temple has a very dolmen-esque character because this looks like a porthole, what you're seeing out here. And it's a west-facing temple here, and near the temple, again, there is a crude dolmen that you can see here. So temples and the dolmen seem to be intermingling, or rather, I would say that the temple which came later were placed in the what is known as a megalithic graveyard. Now, why would they? They probably knew the cultural significance of these megalithic things because they were continuing to in this just before the temple building period too. So why would they do it unless possibly the temples were also commemorating people? So these are some of the other megaliths. There is a megalithic cairn which you can see here, and this is yet another disturbed cairn that you can see here. And so you can see the megaliths in the foreground. Some of them are megaliths, some of them are rock outcrops, and you can see the Galaganatha temple in the backdrop there. And so it looks out that it turns out that you have this Meguti Jain temple here, and behind it you have the entire area covered by megaliths. This is a place called Kadigeri. Unfortunately, the owner of the site has completely destroyed all the megaliths. So there's another megalithic site here. And then in the southwest, you have the entire hillside which has been covered by megaliths. And then you have these groups of temples here. So why are these temples and megaliths intermingling? So one of the clues that I can tell you is that this particular crude megalith, which I showed you to the south of the Ramalingeshwara group, if you look at it, you can see very clearly, they have probably set fire to the rock and removed the slab that you can see here very clearly. They have just raised it on the same place they cut the rock out from. So they just raised it on smaller groups of things. If you measure the capstone, it is 3.3 meters by 2 meters and roughly average 15 centimeters thick, I would say. And if you go and look at the Galaganatha dolmen, that Galaganatha dolmen also is similar kind of dimensions. So it looks like it was a megalith very similar to this. And it was raised on legs by the temple builders, I would say. Now, why would I say the temple builders did that? Because you can see these pillars, the legs or whatever, they have wedge marks on it. What are wedge marks? They use it to, now you will not find wedge marks on the capstone. If you look at the capstone, you will not find a single wedge mark on it, because in those days, when they created the megaliths, the way of stone cutting was usually by firing. You heap firewood and set it on fire, and when it becomes very hot, you quench it by pouring water, and it fractures. And then it fractures in a very irregular manner. But during the time of temple building, they would cut rock by scooping wedge holes, inserting steel wedges, and hammering till it broke. Now, how do I prove that to you? Let's go to some of the quarries near Pattadakal. So this is a Chalukyan quarry near Pattadakal. You have sketches by the artisans like Ganesha is shown here. You have Chalukyan period inscriptions here. You have masons' marks. You have idols which have been carved out. You have inscriptions again talking about the people who owned. Sri Veera Vidyadharan is one person. Sri Matiragan is another one. And you have what has been interpreted as attendance marks of the quarry workers, which are also carved into the rock there. You have also sketch studies. Now, this is a sketch study for a Durga idol, a very unique Durga idol where she is removing a arrow from her quiver on her back. And you find the exact same idol in Papanatha temple in one of the interior niches for the exact same idol. So it's very exciting to be in the quarry to know that this is where some of these artisans, whose names also we know in some cases, they lived, cut stone, conceptualized as the kind of the images that they would carve out at the temples. And so in this place, so this is a view from the quarry when you look out towards the Pattadakal group of temples. And this is Bachanaguda in the distance here. So you can see quarried stone lying around everywhere. And you can also see, this is almost like a laboratory which they've left behind. They would draw a line where they want to cut the stone, mark out points there, draw oval marks that you see out here, and then scoop out the wedge holes, insert steel wedges into all these things, and hammer till it broke. So you can compare the Chalukyan period wedge hole with the wedge holes of the modern quarriers who are illegal. Fortunately, we got it stopped right now. So you can see that the Chalukyan period wedge marks are all oval, and the modern things are all rectangular. Okay, so in any place which has got undoubted Chalukyan context, like this is the Galaganatha temple, not the Aihole one which I showed you earlier, but the Galaganatha temple in Pattadakal. There in the Shukanasi, which is incomplete, the incomplete Shukanasi you can see here, you can again see the U-shaped wedge marks which have come after the stone was split. So I have documented in Chalukyan context in several places in the rock cut temple called Ravalafadi, This is in Huligamanakolla, this is in Virupaksha temple in Patadakal, and all these places, it is the wedge holes are oval shaped or lenticular shaped, and the wedge marks are U-shaped. Compare it with later periods like Hampi, okay, in the Vijayanagara period, where the wedge holes are all rectangular or square, and the wedge marks that come out of it will be angular, not U-shaped. Okay, so if you look at, I will not go into more detail of it. I have a paper which proves that the Chalukyan wedge marks are different from the this Vijayanagara period wedge marks. So now, looking at this, we can with great confidence we can say that these pillars were created by the Chalukyan people who built temples here. And before that, this dolmen also looked something like this. So they put their temples among the dolmens and then they raised it on it. Later on, Professor Srinivas Padigar told me that when ASA took over this site, the idol of Lajja Gauri, which is right now in the Aihola Museum, was found placed on top or somewhere in this particular dolmen. So it is shown that these people have reused it. So this brings into nature the I was telling you about the dolmen-esque nature of some of these temples here. You look at this also, you can see that how they've created a porthole-like situation here. So I strongly feel that all these temples, I'm not telling some of all these temples are commemorative, and these temples are just carrying forward the commemorative tradition which you see in which the megaliths were examples of. And Carol Bolan, who worked much before me in the Malaprabha Valley in the 1970s, so she says that the reason they selected this is a Ravalafadi cave temple. They selected this place is that there's a natural fold in the rock which gives an impression of a capstone, which is why they created this place, is what she says. So I was noticing these couple of things which stand out here on top of the thing here. So there's a close-up of one here, which you can't help feeling that it was partially modified to create the things that I showed you in the earlier slides of the rough dolmens that you see, the crude dolmens, the IPCs or whatever. They've been carved, I would say, modified to make it resemble those. And sepulchral temples are not uncommon. In Sringeri, you have the what do you call, the sepulchral temples of the Shankaracharyas in the compound itself. This temple in Sringeri again, it's a Jain temple. There's an inscription which says that it is built to commemorate one trader called Mari Shetty. So it's very obviously by inscription proven to be a commemorative temple. So there are many temples like these outside that, I mean, in fact, this looks very similar. Outside a Garbhagriha and a porch, a very simple temple. Outside the sacred precincts in Sringeri, I say that this could represent the commemorative temple to lay people, whereas this could be for the holy men. You can see here, this is again, these couple of things are not proven, but these upper two things are definitely proven to be commemorative in nature. Now, I think we have 40 minutes. I think I'll briefly take you through the Krishnagiri megaliths and just show you the connection to stupas also. Now, Krishnagiri megaliths, the ones in Mallasandram, they're large enough that they turn up on like these dots you can see on Google Earth. Okay, so you can see that there are three clusters, the central one and eastern one and the western one. And this is how they look like. Unfortunately, they've been very badly vandalized. This was vandalized just a couple of days before we went to the site. You can see that they dug out the pottery and all that, hoping to find treasure. All they found are some seeds and seed covers and some ashes and bones probably. And this has a lot of similarity to Mallasandram, like I was telling you. There is a place where they cut out all the slabs from, which has become a kind of a pool to hold rainwater and probably help with the rituals of the dead in the site also. We have a similar thing in Mallasandram as well as in Hirabanakal. And if I actually blank out the names, even a visitor who's gone here cannot distinguish between the dolmens of Mallasandram and that of Hirabanakal. They're very similar, though they exist in two different states today. And I want to talk to you about just one particular dolmen here, which you can see here. Inside that, you can see a circular enclosure to this dolmen. So at the heart is this little dolmen, pretty big dolmen actually. And all around it, there are these stone slabs which have been very closely fitted, like a ring of stone slabs, which are different from the other stone slabs you see in Mallasandram. If you look at it from outside, this is what you would see. This is the neck kind of thing out here. And there's a rubble covering, which in 3/4 of the treasure hunters removed it. But when it was complete, it would have looked something like, these are closer up views of the neck from outside. This you can see how they have kept the stone slabs very tightly packed, and they kept large boulders here to keep it in position. And the central dolmen, it has got a kind of a rubble wall which supports it so it doesn't collapse outwards. And I made a drawing of it. So there's a section through it, how it would look like when complete. And an elevation, it looks like a stupa, right? So I call it the stupa dolmen. Okay, so and the stupa is also a sepulchral structure. You have a relic chamber in the middle where you have bones of the holy, and and it's covered by a tumulus or a spherical tumulus. So you have many smaller things like this also in Malasundram, where you have the dolmen in the center. You have stone slabs kept around it and tightly packed. But the one I showed you was the largest and most convincing one in that thing here. So in my long survey of megalithic sites all over all over the South India, so I found that if you're having a very small cairn, let us say, like at this place at Buddanajadu near Udupi, where I used to work, and so the cairn, which if it is very small, it doesn't get disturbed even over large periods of time. But if you want to build a much larger, so this is about 2 or 3 meters in diameter. But if you go to Nagbid and Champa and Vidarbha, where you have cairns which are 20 meters in diameter, so you cannot keep them in position without having a ring of very heavy stones around them. Okay, so that's what you will find. You'll find a cairn around 20-meter diameter cairn surrounded by large stones, which are to keep the cairn. Cairn is basically packing of small stone to keep them in position. And interesting is this place called Chikal Chetty near Bandipur, where they built a very high cairn. The rocks have been heaped in a much bigger heap, much taller heap, I would say. So to keep it in position, they have taken stone slabs and driven them into the ground so that it can hold it in. Even these boulders will not be enough to hold such a large, tall tall cairn. And so, I mean, what you see on the left is what you see in every construction site. If you're heaping sand or something, you'll keep something to contain them all around. This is exactly the structural principle behind the stupa, I would say. If you have a small cairn, you can leave it just like that. It won't get dissipated. But if you're having a larger one, you need to have these boulders around it to keep it in position. Again, if you want to keep it much bigger, you will need a stone slab which are driven into the ground to keep it in position, retain its shape. And it's only one step away from here to what you call the stupa dolmen. And then an actual stupa, like something like this is a Buddhist stupa in a place called Kanaganahalli on the banks of the river Bhima in northern Karnataka. It's in 2-step cylinders. And then this is humble dolmen circle which you find in Malasundram, which has got a neck of stone slab, which I was showing you. This neck became a place where you could do carvings and represent the stories of the Buddha, from the life of the Buddha, the emperors who promoted him and all that. So this is another aerial view of the stupa it's ruined. Unfortunately, the anda, the hemispherical thing over it, dome over it, has collapsed. And this is probably the archaeological discovery of the 20th century, the latter half of the 20th century, where you find an almost intact slabs all around it. This is the builders of the Amaravati stupa itself were probably involved in working on the stupa. We have some names also which are similar in that, Nagabuddhi, for example. And the neck I was telling you, this wonderful sculpture of Muchilinda, the Nagaraja who sheltered the Buddha when he was getting enlightenment. So all these carvings, etc., the neck became a place where you could. The site is very unique because it's got the only inscribed portrait of Ashoka, Emperor Ashoka. This says in Brahme Rayo Ashoko, and this shows the emperor with his queen and surrounded by his bodyguards, all of whom are female actually. And stories from the Buddha's life, all are there on the stupa slabs. So the great setting out where Buddha is shown as by his absence, the Kantaka, the Buddha's horse, is going forth. And then after leaving him in the forest, they're coming back, and you can see the difference in body language. So a beautiful set of sculpture that you have here. So what I was trying to say is that even these later monuments like temples or the stupa in this case could have evolved from this humble dolmen that we're talking about, the megaliths that we're talking about. So yeah, thank you. I think I've finished in 47 minutes. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take questions.
We can, there's so much to cover. We can keep talking about it further. I hope if you have time, we can expand upon.
Definitely. No problem at all.
Okay. So let me start with this major division of, let's say, the megalithic period structures. And then again, leaving out the period, as you clearly pointed out, it is more a cultural practice and not a time period. We can clearly see that the megalithic ones are largely rough. If you leave out things like Kodakal, which is unbelievably superbly finished, and I don't understand how that even happened, to a very highly structured, be it a Buddhist stupa, be it various Hindu temples that we are seeing later in time. Again, these are also sort of cultural practice in the sense that we see 2nd century BCE to then suddenly nothing is there. Then in the South Indian regions, starting from Badami, etc., we see it in the 5th century on nicely structured, Hindu, Buddhist, and Jaina architecture. Right. The one drastic thing is the finish quality and very well developed, architectural, iconographic canons. So we can sort of see that one is a pre-codified period, the other is a very highly codified period by just looking at the structure itself. Would you agree with that, or you see that there was probably a continuum?
I agree with that, but there's probably a continuum because you see in certain places in Nilgiris, for example, and also a place called Avatti near Bangalore.
Can you hear me?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Okay, I think can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, or maybe I should go into the other room probably because
no, this is fine. This is fine. Just continue.
Okay. So yeah, I do agree with you because but there are certain dolmens that you see close to in Krishnagiri also. For example, I forget the name of the site. It's called Chennasandaram, I think. And Chennasandaram, Nilgiri is in many places which I have not seen, and a place called Avatti near Bangalore. You have dolmens which are rear wall is a hero stone. So you have a sculptural program there that is carved, and they are a little bit better finished than that. But definitely there have been influences from outside, which outside could be anything from just outside the region to outside the country, if you can think about it. I'll give you an example. If you look at the sculptural program in the Kanaganahalli Stupa, okay, so they have stories of the Buddha, they have stories of emperor, like the examples I showed you. They also have real and mythical animals which are going, like for example, the stones over the Torana, they go in a clockwise direction, kind of directing the devotee how to circumambulate and all that. So some of them are camels. Now, all the camels there are double humped. So there are no camels in Karnataka, and the camels that are very closer. So it shows that, and also we know that, for example, the Brahmagiri inscription was one of the scribes we know is the Chapada, who was from Gandhara region. So he has come down to carve the message of Ashoka in because he writes everything in Brahmi, only his name he signs in Kharoshti, kind of giving an identity about him.
Almost like what you see in Kanchi, right? Where almost all the inscriptions are in Brahmi, and there are one or two Kharoshti also written there.
Yes, right? So it shows that
there also the same similar theory holds that there were quite a few Gandharan architects involved, sculptors involved.
So when I was reading Professor Shetter's work, he has published just before he passed away in 2020. He has published a good book on early Buddhist artisans and their vocabulary, architectural vocabulary. So that talks about different kinds of professionals, I would call him, who were involved in the construction of stupa. There were some of the people called Aveshanis, who did not directly participate in because one of the things I saw in Kanaganahalli was that the camels are drawn like caricature, like cartoons actually. It's very clear that the person has not seen a real camel. Whereas the elephant is shown in great detail. I've never seen better elephant sculpture anywhere in all the things that I've seen there. So it shows that they were intimately familiar with that. So it tells me that the sculptors were probably local, but the guys who guided the sculptural program were Gandharan. So
I have a theory. I mean, the same problem exists with, say, lions, right?
Yes.
Across India, it's not that, however, lion is very much part of the Indian literature, religion, that its depiction is certainly nowhere near what it actually looks like, right? So camel is exactly like that, right? Camel has been talked about in Sangam literature, what camel does. So it has prompted a researcher here to come up with fairly wild theories. So it is not necessary, in my view at least, that one has to have seen it. It is about presence in literature, and that probably is the one that distinguishes the the megalithic cultures vis-a-vis a highly sophisticated. I'm not using the word sophisticated in that loaded sense. The pre-writing and the post-writing,
structured, programmed, or whatever.
Yeah, where things, the knowledge about the world in some form has spread through literature. It has been talked about, it has been written about, it has been carried on. You may not probably even require a Gandharan architect to come to South India, but just that memory and thought and idea. I know you are talking about inscriptional evidence. I'm just saying, I could be sitting in a corner of, let's say, Kanyakumari, get the knowledge about the world and try to depict that. If I have to depict Buddha, and I know that Buddha comes from far north, from Nepalese region, or what was then part of the larger Indian subcontinent, then I only need that story. The rest I will make up, right? Is it not the case?
It could be, but the way they have carved it, because they showed the two humps, and one of the humps, they must have drawn some small sketches and showed, because even though it is cartoonistic.
My challenge is, it could even be descriptions in the literature which says this is how.
But I don't know how familiar the local artisans were with that Buddhist literature in the 2nd century BCE to maybe 2nd century CE. I don't know. It's all conjectural till we know it's something about how familiar were they with the Buddhist literature also. Yeah. Because there's also a lot of all the sculptural program there has to be, and they're very properly conceived in the. Whereas I would say in Sanchi, even the sculptor is probably Gandharan, because the Bactrian camel in Sanchi is very beautifully carved on the Toranas. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
I may have a picture somewhere, but I can't, right now I may not be able to. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, so there in Sanchi, I would say even the sculptor has seen a Bactrian camel. Okay. Because it's in great detail. You know, the little hair which comes at the elbows and the mane and the beard, and everything is carved very well on the Torana. Whereas in Kanaganhalli, it's covered. So that is why I feel that, and the sculptural program, the Nikaya text, only a person who's very familiar with that can come and supervise the thing. And so he says that there's the Karoshti Lipiwala Aveshan is where they spread out in many of the places where stupas were erected. So it's quite possible that they came here. These camels also tell another story in Pattadakal also, in the quarry which I showed you. There are a lot of camels, that dromedary camels, single humped ones. But then there's been a lot of debate whether there were North Indian artisans involved in the construction of the Nagara temples in Aihole. I think that they were there because only in the quarry, you don't find the camel in the sculptural program in any of the temples. You find a lot of the camel sketches in the quarries there. So I think that it's a very unscientific, I would say, way of inferring the presence of Northern Indian, maybe Gujarat, Malwa, or Rajasthan, or whatever, who had come here and who had erected those Nagara-style temples in Mahakuta, Aihole, and Pattadakal, possibly. So, you know, animals give a lot of insight into.
Yeah. No, the added confusion, if you may call it confusion, is that the mix of the two architectural styles, the northern and the southern architectural styles, in particularly the region that, the Malaprabha Valley that you are talking about, saying what then was the original, we keep calling it the very much part of the Dravida Desa in a sense, but it was not. It was a clear border. So if you go to Pattadakal, you have everything sitting next to each other. So what were the local artisans really thinking as their style?
If you notice, there's one more style which people miss out, which is the Ladkhan temple, which George Mitchell has called the Malaprabha style. He claims that is a local homegrown thing, and both these things had come from whatever the more codified things of temple architecture. In fact, there is that little open mandapa.
You're talking about the sloping roof and then a vedika above, flattening. Yeah.
Exactly. The slightly sloped things, and then there's an upper story. Correct. And all that.
Yes.
So in fact, this open mantapa that you find in Badami, I had with one of my students, I had reconstructed what it would have looked like. In fact, people say that this was monument which was demolished by the Pallava during the Pallava invasion. But I have found it's actually an incomplete monument. It is not demolished. It's just an incomplete monument, and if complete, it would have looked like the Ladkan actually. It does not look like any of the Dravida or the Nagara thing. So that's one style which was homegrown. But there's definitely there are some unresolved issues there, because in Patadakal we have inscriptions about the different architects who work there. So there's a very often they say Tenkana Dishaya Sutradhari. Now, what the Tenkana Disha mean? Does it mean lower Deccan, or does it mean actual deep south? People are in not in agreement about that.
Yes.
So there were definitely artisans like the Papanatha temple. It has got a Nagara tower, but the Hara has got kutas and shalas. It's a proper Dravida.
Right. That's correct.
And there they talk about one of the architects. I think it's called Revadi Ovajjar or something. They claim that he is a disciple of another architect, Sarvasiddhi Acharya, I think, who's called the Tenkana Disha Sutradhari. So I think he's responsible for the southern style elements, and somebody else is responsible for the northern style elements. So that's actually a fusion which they've attempted there in Papanatha.
Right. So let's go back to some of the I don't know whether now I'm a little confused about the terminology, say prehistoric or the unstructured, the rock art that you showed. Right? We have seen that there is plenty of rock art. Of course, the Bhimbetka, Madhya Pradesh region. There's plenty of rock art in the Tamil Nadu region as well, in different parts. Right? Now, the ones that you showed, how much have they been studied in terms of dating, in terms of its style? Some of the wild boars that were shown in that, they were very high quality in terms of true to life kind of a thing. Right? So, what kind of a study has happened in terms of continuity or interconnection between rock art spread across India?
I think one problem, dating has remained a thorn in the flesh, because we don't have any direct methods of dating, and this stylistic dating can always be very tricky. For example, in the Malaprabha Shivalaya, there's a temple in Badami. So inside
I visited there. In fact, most of the main structures we have visited as Tamil Heritage Trust as a group to most of the structures, except the many other things that you showed. We have not even been there. Yeah, but please, continue.
Yeah, that's one reason I didn't show that. I was showing mostly the lesser known monuments than because the main ones everyone knows there. So Malaprabha Shivalaya, one of the pillars has a ochre painting of a person with a sword and all that. So that obviously has come up after the pillar was built, well into the Chalukyan period.
Right.
But if it had been on a rough rock surface, people might have even called it prehistoric. So there's a lot of I think we have to still develop some way of directly dating. If you find, maybe scrape a little bit of some places, people really old rock art, like from the Paleolithic and all that, people have dated it by looking at the limestone flow which has come over it after the painting was made. But unless we find some direct method, it will always be a problem. But there's some in Malaprabha Valley, there's a researcher called R. Mohana who has done his PhD from Deccan College on this. He has done a lot of work on. But what I have noticed in general is that where there is very ancient rock art, people subsequent cultures, even if they are culturally discontinuous, tend to use that to add their paintings to it. And then sometimes you find even temples coming up to it nearby.
Okay.
So it looks like what your ancestors found sacred, that place continues to be sacred for me, because I found too many to be coincidence, that there's so many places where there's rock art and then the later temple which have come up near that. So this is something which I think is rich material for study in the future.
So I want to touch upon the sepulchral temples in sort of three parts, right? So first we see that all the megalithic burial sites, dolmens, etc., are meant to be funerary, because we have found enough basic material. Then you see that there is a jump over to a sort of a hero stone model, where if you really dig, it's a memorial stone only. There is no funerary material itself. There is no bone or whatever it is, right? Then at a third level comes the temples, which are very clearly of a much, it's for the king. So it's king's remains are buried, and temples, perhaps saints, which is the Buddhist model that almost every important Buddhist preceptor has a stupa built around. In the Hindu system also, you do have that, but perhaps much later. The kings, what in Tamil Nadu is called as Pallipadai temples, we see this practice happening. But somewhere the commoner's burial is transforming into a hero's stone, which is transforming into a king and saint's thing. In the process, the commoner is sort of relegated, moved out from this kind of high-end religious monument, is it not?
I'm not very sure about it, because some of the studies, which not mine, but Professor Murthy studies, for example, he claims that we have enough evidence to say even in the megalithic period that everyone who lived in that time did not end up inside a megalith. It was only for certain class of individuals. So it had already become that way during the megalithic period, is what he says. So maybe class in society before that was more egalitarian. The Neolithic and all we find is more egalitarian. And by the time the age of the megaliths comes, it's already sort of only elites get buried in, either religious leaders or maybe chieftains and all that. So all the dolmens are meant to be for people of some eminence.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't really think that way. Okay, this is really interesting. There's a question from Pawan Jain. Would you say that the Sanchi Temple 17 could be a commemorative one too, since it has proximity to the Sanchi Stupa? Would you?
I have seen temple number 17, but I cannot really say that because I have not really studied that in detail. But it's quite possible that because you see, most of the time the way commemorative temples come up, like in Bhutnath, I was saying, and there are many other places also. There will be one main temple to a large to a prominent deity, usually Shiva, and then around it you find what do you call the tombs, the commemorative temples of lesser of people coming up around it. Okay, so but Sanchi I have not studied.
So this the Sanchi Temple 17 is a Gupta era temple. It is quite late in time. Yes. So I don't know how the stupa itself is pre Ashoka period, and then Ashoka sort of rebuilds that, whereas the temple 17 is very clearly a Hindu temple of 5th century CE or so, is what I
understand. But usually traditions continue actually. I've seen it in many places that, like for example, one of the megalithic sites at a place called Baise, you have megalithic cairns and menhirs. In the southern portion of it, you have hero stones from the hero stone graves from the Keladi Nayaka period, which is post Vijayanagara period. So so late as 16th century or whatever, people are still associating these prehistoric megaliths as a place for interring eminent people, and they're continuing the tradition so late, which means that they had that cultural significance there. So the stupa period to 5th century AD, it's theoretically possible, in principle possible that it could have been there, but without studying that, I wouldn't be able to commit.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I don't think there is any inscription that can say anything about whether it is sepulchral or not. So yeah, it's worth looking at. Chitra Ganapati, you talked about this, Aihole, Ainutruvar, and also the Ravikirti inscription at Mehuti temple. She mentions, her question is, can you explain this Ainutruvar where you say 634 CE? 634 is the Ravikirti inscription that you mentioned. While it is mentioned earlier in Sangam period in Tamil country. I think Ainutruvar, I don't know whether it is mentioned in Sangam poetry. She says, are you saying these Ainutruvars are only in the 7th century or later, or given the fact that...
Sorry, please continue.
Yeah.
Please complete the question.
I think her question is, there is a mention of them in as early as in Sangam poetry. But I think she understood from your presentation that they are mentioned much later in the 7th century Ravikirti inscription.
It's not in the Ravikirti inscription. It's in the it's not in the Ravikirti inscription. I meant that they were there in the 7th century, and they continued till much later also. Even after Badami ceased to be the after they lost out to the Rashtrakuta, it continued. Aihole continued to be a center for very a prosperous merchant guild.
I think they are mentioned in the later Chola inscriptions also of various merchant guilds, which includes this Ainutruvar and many other Nana Desi, many other groups.
Yes, they continued till 12th or 13th century, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not an expert in this, but that's what I remember. And Meera Abraham, I think, has a thesis on that and a book on this same merchant guilds in Aihole Badami.
Okay. Now, if the one thing that I found really interesting in one of your images is that there are very highly organized structures in one of the images that you showed, in which also there are dolmens within that same compound. I have now forgotten. I wanted to note it down, but I missed it.
Was probably the Ramalingeshwara temple and all that.
Yes, Ramalingeshwara temple. Correct. That I thought was quite cute in the sense that they didn't really think of removing it or sort of clearing the place for a new structure. And they were also sort of merging with the overall stone buildings that they were building all around. Now, where exactly is this Ramalingeshwara, this particular compound?
But that is to the southwest of like Aihole town is there. To the south and to the west of it, there are three. So it's actually parallel to Meguti Hill, to the west of it. In fact, it's on the bank from the Ramalingeshwara temple compound. You can actually see Malaprabha River on your left when you face north.
Okay.
Okay. So that's
very not
close.
Clear whether I visited.
It's a deviation. Like when you before you enter Aihole, you'll take a left turn through an arch and then go a little bit. Usually people don't go there; they miss it out because the main sites are very much in the front. So even before you turn right to go to the Jain cave in Aihole, before that you will turn left.
We typically start with the Jain cave because that's the way we are sort of entering the town.
Yes.
And
so even before that, you take a turn to the left.
Okay. I think I have missed this. I have to note it down. That was really fascinating. It's very, very interesting. I usually, we have, we focus on, some of our speakers are getting all kinds of calls. Sorry about that. So initially, when we are really looking at a topic, there will be some kind of a concentration on, let's say, sculptures of Badami or structures of Aihole or Pattadagalle. But here, we are taking a geographical region, slightly wider geographical region, but time period that goes across different cultural periods in a sense. And that adds a certain complexity in studying them. So how did you go about, have you sort of mapped all the places that you have, all the structures, given it some kind of a timeline, as in roughly guessing what century it belongs to? How do you go about studying these things?
That's an interesting question. Initially, it was not my intention to study the later part. My PhD was on megaliths. So I was visiting megalithic sites in different parts of it. But Badami was Aihole was a big eye opener. When I saw these megaliths, something didn't seem to quite click. So I thought, okay, I'll think about it later. And during my Homi Baba fellowship, I started looking at places which have a long history of human occupation. So primarily three regions. You have the Badami region, then the Hampi Hirabanikal region. There also you have and also the Sannati Sirival region. So in Sannati you have the stupas, then later Sirival you have the Rashtrakuta temples and all that. And so, but it is very useful to look at things across periods, because very often a lot of major errors have been committed because people are too specialized into what they're looking at. So, for instance, you have in the Himalaya, I'm going to go to a completely different landscape now. You have this so-called megalithic site at a place called Devi Dhura. And they say there's a lot of rock art there. And when I went there, it's actually, it's the wedge holes I showed you that people used to cut stone. So that is the thing that people have been calling rock art, mainly because the people who are looking at rock art, they did not see temple, quarries and stuff like that.
Okay.
So sometimes just spreading your this thing actually gives you more insight than looking at one narrow focus of it.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's I mean, we talk a lot about the kind of topics one can take and do research in science or engineering. But I see that in the history, art, archaeology, culture space, the number of topics that are available and things that we have not unraveled are just so many in number. I think it's
Absolutely.
really this is so much to
I have
study in these things. I'm really looking forward to many of your students looking at various aspects of this. So if over the next 5 years you have 20-30 people who are working on this, that will be really fascinating. So you're sort of seeding more people to research in this area, who in turn get into academics and then start seeding more ideas in this particular area.
I certainly hope so too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fascinating. I think we have more topics that we can expand on this, or maybe I'll discuss with Shyam and come back to you to take up more topics for our future lectures in Tamil Heritage Trust. Thank you. Thanks a lot on behalf of Tamil Heritage Trust. It's really rewarding listening to you and understanding an area that some of us don't come from but visited, but looking at it from your lens in terms of all the other things that are happening around, some of the known, very well-known Badami Chalukyan and Rashtrakutan and other later Kalyani Chalukyan sculptures, and suddenly we are seeing that there's so much more to see there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.